Good afternoon, grasshoppers. I hope you are all well. I'm wearing my panda dress today. I thought you'd like it. It always puts me in a good mood when I wear it. I also went for a run in the sunshine this morning, which was really nice. And I saw loads of blossom, loads and loads of blossom. And that always makes me think of you when we went on our lovely trip to Primrose Hill. We were looking for signs of spring. We were looking for the blossom. Now the blossom is very much out, so I hope that you're getting out for your daily walk, if you're allowed to, and looking for those signs of spring, because spring has sprung, and it makes me feel so happy every time I look at that, all that lovely blossom. Okay, so Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Day 2, Chapter 2. Mr. Willy Wonka's Factory. In the evenings, after he had finished his supper of watery cabbage soup, Charlie always went into the room of his 4 grandparents to listen to their stories, and then afterwards to say goodnight. Every one of these old people was over 90. They were as shriveled as prunes, very shrivelly and wrinkled, and as bony as skeletons. And throughout the day, until Charlie made his appearance, they lay huddled in their one bed, 2 at either end, with nightcaps on to keep their heads warm, dozing the time away with nothing to do. So they were just having a nice little sleep because they had nothing else to do. But as soon as they heard the door opening and heard Charlie's voice saying, "Good evening, Grandpa Joe and Grandma Josephine and Grandpa George and Grandma Georgina," then all 4 of them would suddenly sit up and their old wrinkled faces would light up with smiles of pleasure and the talking would begin. For they loved this little boy. He was the only bright thing in their lives, and his evening visits were something that they could look forward to all day long. Often Charlie's mother and father would come in as well and stand by the door, listening to the stories that the old people told, and thus, for perhaps about half an hour every night, this room would become a happy place, and the whole family would forget it was hungry and poor. One evening, when Charlie went in to see his grandparents, he said to them, "Is it really true that Wonka's Chocolate Factory is the biggest in the world?" "True?" cried all 4 of them at once. "Of course it's true. Good heavens, don't you know that? It's about 50 times as big as any other." "And is Willy Wonka really the cleverest chocolate maker in the world?" "My dear boy," said Grandpa Joe, raising himself up a little higher on his pillow, "Mr. Willy Wonka is the most amazing, the most fantastic, the most extraordinary chocolate maker the world has ever seen. I thought everybody knew that." This is Grandpa Joe sitting up in his bed, waving his finger, telling Charlie all about it. You can see Grandma Josephine, you can see Grandma Georgina and Grandpa George. "I knew he was famous, Grandpa Joe, and I knew he was clever." "Clever?" cried the old man. "He's more than that. He's a magician with chocolate. He can make anything he wants. Isn't that a fact, my dears?" The 3 other old people nodded their heads slowly up and down. And they said, "Absolutely true. Just as true as it can be." And Grandpa Joe said, "You mean to say I've never told you about Willy Wonka and his chocolate factory?" "Never," answered little Charlie. "Good heavens above, I don't know what's the matter with me." "Will you tell me now, Grandpa Joe, please?" "I certainly will. Sit down beside me on the bed, my dear, and listen carefully. I wonder what he's going to tell him." Grandpa Joe was the oldest of the 4 grandparents. He was 96 and a half, and that is just about as old as anybody can be. Like all extremely old people, he was delicate and weak, and throughout the day he spoke very little. But in the evenings, when Charlie, his beloved grandson, was in the room, he seemed in some marvellous way to grow quite young again. All his tiredness fell away from him, and he became as eager and as excited as a young boy. What a man he is, this Willy Wonka, Mr. Willy Wonka, cried Grandpa Joe. Did you know, for example, that he himself invented more than 200 new kinds of chocolate bars, each with a different centre, each far sweeter and creamier and more delicious than anything the other chocolate factories can make? Perfectly true, cried Grandma Josephine. And he sends them all to the four corners of the earth. Isn't that so, Grandpa Joe? It is, my dear, it is. And to all the kings and presidents of the world as well. But it isn't only the chocolate bars that he makes. Oh, dear me, no. He has some really fantastic inventions up his sleeve. Mr. Willy Wonka really does. Did you know that he's invented a way of making chocolate ice cream so that it stays cold for hours and hours without being in the refrigerator? You can even leave it lying in the sun all morning on a hot day and it won't go runny. But that's impossible, said little Charlie, staring at his grandfather. Of course it's impossible, cried Grandpa Joe. It's completely absurd. But Mr. Willy Wonka has done it. Quite right, the others agreed, nodding their heads. Mr. Willy Wonka, he's done it. And then again, Grandpa Joe went on speaking very slowly now so that Charlie wouldn't miss a word. Mr. Willy Wonka can make marshmallows that taste of violets and rich caramels that change colour every 10 seconds as you suck them, and little feathery sweets that melt away deliciously the moment you put them between your lips. He can make chewing gum that never loses its taste, and sugar balloons that you can blow up to enormous sizes before you pop them with a pin and gobble them all up. And by a most secret method, he can make lovely bluebird's eggs with black spots in them. And when you put one of these in your mouth, it gradually gets smaller and smaller until suddenly there is nothing left except a tiny, little, pink, sugary, baby bird sitting on the tip of your tongue. Can you show me that sugary bird sitting on the tip of your tongue? I hope I don't swallow it. Grandpa Joe paused and ran the point of his tongue slowly over his lips. He's imagining those delicious things. It makes my mouth water just thinking about it, he said. Mine too, said little Charlie, but please go on. While they were talking, Mr. and Mrs. Bucket, Charlie's mother and father, had come quietly into the room, and now both were standing just inside the door listening. Tell Charlie about that crazy Indian prince, said Grandma Josephine. He'd like to hear that. You mean Prince Pondicherry? Said Grandpa Joe, and he began chuckling with laughter. Can you show me him chuckling? Completely dotty, said Grandpa George. But very rich, said Grandma Georgina. What did he do? Asked Charlie eagerly. Listen, said Grandpa Joe, and I'll tell you. And that is the end of chapter 2. See you back here tomorrow, beetles. Beetles? Grasshoppers.